Hello everyone, this is Unit 9, Lesson 5, and we're going to deal with solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula in this lesson. But to do now is right here, number 1, y equals x squared plus 34x minus 72, and number 2 is this one right here. Try those two. Remember, solve them for the roots and see if you could do it algebraically and then check it in your calculator. You could press pause now. Right, so I found out that I was looking for a number that numbers that multiply to 72 and that add to 34. Remember, it has to multiply to a negative, so one of them has to be positive, one of them has to be negative. And I found out that 1 and 72 did not work. 2 and 36 did, though. The 36 has to be positive and the 2 has to be negative for it to add to a positive 34. So you have x minus 2 times x plus 36 equals 0. Replacing that y with the 0, and then you have x minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 36 equals 0. Solve each, and you have x equals 2 or x equals negative 36. Taking a look right over here, this is even easier than the question that we just did. There's no factoring even involved with this. There's two equations. This is what it would be equal to 0, and then this is equal to 0. Solve both and you'll get the roots for this. So go ahead, try it. You can press pause now. Alright, so we have 5x equals 0 and you have 6x plus 27 equals 0. That's why I said it was easier. You know, this question was a little bit easier. You didn't really have to factor. You just have to kind of split up into two equations, then solve x equals 0 for this one root. And then you have the 6x plus 27 equals 0. You subtract 27 on both sides. You divide by 6. And you do get x equals 4.5. That's the other root. All right, so two roots for that. So it says find the sum, the state test prep, find the sum. Hopefully you did get that, number 2. You can check your answers there. Find the sum of the solutions for 3x squared plus 13x minus 10. And usually it does equal 0. So just so you know. So I copied this question and I put an equals 0 on the end here because there's no room over here to do it. And this is, you're going to factor by grouping here. So the first thing that you do, remember, is A times C. So this is, you know, a question that we've done so far, and it's 3 times 10, and I don't really, it's 30. Just remember, it has to be a negative 30, but you're really looking for factors of 30 that multiply to 30 and that add to a positive 13. Okay, so I am just going to go 1 times 30 right now. That doesn't, you can't make 13 out of that. 2 times 15. That works. But remember, it has to multiply to a negative 30, so and add to a positive 13, and it will if you put a negative 2 and a positive 15. So you have your two factors. So one thing I did want you to understand, and I've said this plenty of times, this 13x becomes the negative 2x plus 15x. And it's just replacing this. So you're not changing anything. You're bringing this 3x squared down. You're bringing this down, but now you're splitting it up. And then you're bringing this negative 10. So what you do is now you get the greatest common factor of the first two terms, which seems to be just x, since none of the numbers have common factors at all. So x times what equals 3x squared. X times 3x equals 3x squared. And then x times what equals 2x, it's just simply 2. Now this binomial should be the same thing when you factor out the your greatest common factor inside the parentheses. Should be the same binomials. Let's see if it is. So we have a common factor of 5 between 15 and 10, so we're going to factor that out. 5 times 3x equals 15x, and then 5 times a negative 2 equals negative 10, and all of that equals 0. So when you go ahead and put those two equations together, you have x plus 5 equals 0, and 3x minus 2 equals 0. And so now we have x plus 5 equals 0, 3x minus 2 equals 0. Like I said, subtract 5 on both sides, you get x equals negative 5, or, and then you solve on both sides here, plus 2, 3x divided, 3x equals 2, divide by 3 on both sides. It becomes 2/3, but I like to have it as a decimal because it just seems a little bit easier for me to think about where this would cross that x-axis. And that's about it. Those are your answers. So you could also solve quadratic equations by one last method. It's called using the quadratic formula. This is the quadratic formula right here. It's negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, it's not that bad. Don't worry about it. It does look a little crazy, but this is really used in it this way. This technique is used when you can't factor easily, right? This always works. Quadratic formula works. Get used to using it. Get used to seeing it. It is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, so for quadratic equations, remember it has to be in this format: ax squared plus bx plus c. This is standard form for a quadratic. So it always works. Simply plug in the values, since you just have to substitute the values in and solve. Other methods may be easier, and I would always say to use the calculator, but sometimes they ask you about using the quadratic formula. So remember, a is right in front of the x squared, the b is in front of x, and the c is just a number alone. So you'll have to identify those variables before you use this quadratic formula. All right, and so let's go. So this is one example of how you would use that quadratic formula. Remember, it's standard form: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You substitute and solve. The quadratic formula is right here. So when you go ahead and solve an example like this, you have 2x squared plus 8x minus 10 equals 0. You write down the quadratic formula first thing. We're going to solve using the quadratic formula. Believe me, there are other ways that you could solve this. You could solve this by grouping. All right? But if they ask you to use the quadratic formula, or if they ask for a step in the quadratic formula, then you would know how to do it. So this negative, so the first thing that I would do is write down your a. My a is 2. My b is 8. And my c, remember, my c is the negative 10, right? So that's what we're going to substitute in. So this, see this negative b? This 8 becomes a negative 8. Plus or minus is part of that formula. Square root b squared. B squared is 8 squared. Minus 4a. A is 2. So we're putting a in parentheses. A is right down there. And then c is negative 10. And the beauty of this is that you just put this into the calculator. Right, this part right here, and all of this right here, well, and then you have 2 times a, which is just 2 is 4. So now you have negative 8 plus or minus. Do you see the next step here? See 8 squared? You know it's 64. I I wouldn't even go that far because I would just put this whole thing in the calculator like you see it, and then it would come out to be 144. So now you have negative 8 plus or minus square root of 144 over 4. And what you do is that it happens to be the square root of 144 is a perfect square. So it's negative 8 plus or minus 12, because remember, the answer to a square root is both positive and negative. So you have 8 times 8 equals 144, and negative 8 times negative 8 equals 144. And then you divide that whole thing by 4. So you split this up. So you have negative 8 plus 12 over 4. And then you have negative 8 minus 12 over 4. And you have both sides, you split it, x equals 1 and x equals negative 5. And that's how you would do that. All right, so we're going to practice a little bit, and I'll do the first couple with you, and then you could just go ahead. This is pretty easy now. It's just make sure you're putting everything in standard form, if it's not in standard form already. And we're just going to label what the A is, what the B is, and what the C is for this. So remember, A equals the number before the x squared, so A is 2. B is the number next to the x, which is 8 in this case. And C is the number on its own without the variable is negative 10. You are finished. All right, so now it says to use the quadratic formula to solve each of the equations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just substitute these into the quadratic formula, which is right there, and I am just going to get my answer. Right? You might need more room, so it might be better to just use like maybe loose leaf for this part, because it really does, like, you know, with the substitution and everything. But remember, use your calculator for when you go ahead and you substitute it in. Okay, so I substituted in. So this is negative b. I'm looking at the quadratic formula. Negative b is 8, so I turned it to negative. Plus or minus, part of the square root, plus part of the formula. Square root 8 squared, which is b squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2. And then times negative 10, which is the c. Right, over 2 times a, which is 2 times 2 is 4. Right, so once you have that substituted in, what I would do is just put that right here, all of this, inside the calculator. So it's 8 squared. You know it's 64. But, I mean, you could put it directly in the calculator. 4 minus 4 times 2 in parentheses, and then in parentheses, negative 10, and close the parenthesis and enter, and 144. So this is the same one that we did before, but I'm just going over this with you right now. Okay, so just like we did on the problem before, like that we looked at, we substituted in. We got the square root of 144. And then we took the square root of 144, and you have plus or minus 12 as the answer, and you have negative 8 plus or minus 12 over 4, because 2 times 2 equals 4. Yeah, and then you split it up, negative 8 plus 12 over 4, and negative 8 minus 12 over 4. You get 4 over 4 on the left side, you get x equals 1, and then you get negative 8 minus 12 over 4, which is negative 20 over 4, x equals negative 5. All right, I'll do this one with you, and I'm just going to write down. Okay, so the A is definitely 1. All right, because that's the 1 right there. That's the A. The B is 15. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Let me stop. Is this in standard form? No, it's not. Okay, so I'm going to have to do something first to get that in standard form, and then pick the A, B, and C. See, I was rushing right here, and that wasn't correct. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. And I would suggest really writing this on loose leaf, because there's definitely, look at the first question. It's going to be every question. So I would have to get this equal to 0 and transfer that 8 over. All right, you see, I was putting down the A, B, and C, and that's not correct. You have x squared. All right, you have 15x minus 8x. So it's a plus 7x. And all of that equals 0. All right, so now the A is 1, but the B is 7. And the C, there is no C. 0. So just take a look. All right, so that's it. So now go ahead, use that quadratic formula. Write down that quadratic formula again. Well, actually, don't write it down, but just substitute the numbers in and see if you could kind of work it out. Press pause now. I wanted to see where you were just halfway through when you were substituting in. You have -7 plus or minus, because this is supposed to be B. All right, let me just go up and take a look at that. Quadratic formula, this is -B. So I turn that +7 into a -7. Then it's plus or minus from the formula, square root from the formula. 7 squared is B squared. That's it. All right. -4, which is in the formula, times A, which is 1 in this case, times C, which is 0. Makes it a lot easier. So all of this, if you put this into the calculator, or if you could just do it in your head, 7 squared is 49, minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 0 is 0. So this whole thing is 0. So 49 minus 0, 49. 2 times 1, 2. All right, so now you go about splitting up the equation, and this is, by the way, a perfect square. So just like you have here, -7 plus or minus square root of 49 over 2, -7 plus or minus 7 over 2. So when you split this up, it should look like this. So you have -7 plus or minus 7 over 2, -7 plus 7, and -7 minus 7, all over 2. -7 plus 7 is 0. 0 over 2 is 0. And then -7 minus 7 is -14. -14 divided by 2 is -7. And that is it. Okay, see if you could do that third problem. We'll come back with the answer and go over them. Like I said, there's a lot of work as far as the writing goes. See if you could do it, and we'll come back with those answers and explain. Hopefully you got that. You'll be able to get that correct. Press pause now. Okay, so we have 5 as A, B is 0. All right, because remember the B has to have the X next to it, and then the C is -20, the number without the X. When you substitute it in, it looks like this, and all of this equals square root of 400. Square root of 400 is 20, and 2 times 5 is 10. That bottom number, the denominator, and then you just go ahead and split it up like this: 0 plus 20 over 10, 0 minus 20 over 10. 20 over 10 is 2. That's one of the roots. And -20 over 10 is -2. You could substitute this into the calculator, and it'll give you the same roots. That's why if they don't ask for work like this, if they don't ask you to use the quadratic formula, I would not use it. Right? Use the calculator. All right. So if you don't have to show work, if it's multiple choice, which this is not, and this is a lesson on quadratic formula, you have to show all this work, and it's a lot. Right? So go ahead and see if you can work on the next problems. I actually made another page for the next 3 problems. Just do one more problem and see if we can work it out. And we'll come back with the answer and just go over it. Okay, so we have A is 1 and B is -5. It's a pretty easy question. And C is 4. So when you substitute the B in, the B is supposed to be negative, right? In the quadratic formula, see how the B is negative? I'll just lift this up. See how the B right here is negative? So that means when you go and substitute that B in, this B is already negative. So I have a negative from the formula and then a -5. So the double negative becomes a positive. Just when you see a double negative like that, it's kind of like distributive property. You have negative times negative, which is positive, plus or minus from the formula, square root from the formula, negative. This is a negative. This is B, but it's negative, so it's -5 squared. When you have a -5 and it's squared, obviously you're going to get a positive number, a positive answer. So I just changed this right here. Squared should be really on the outside. So -4 times A times C. So that is all equal. I put this directly into the calculator, just like this, and it's equal to 9. All right, so square root of 9 is 3. And you have 5 plus or minus 3 over 2 because 2 times 1 is on that in the denominator. So you have 5 plus 3 divided by 2 and 5 minus 3 divided by 2. You have 8 over 2 and you have 2 over 2. X equals 4 or X equals 1. All right, so that's basically it. Go ahead, do number 2. Press pause now. Okay, fun continues. A equals 1, B equals 4, C equals 4 again. So you have -4, which is negative B, plus or minus B squared, which is 4 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 4. Put this into the calculator just the way it is, with the parentheses and everything, you get 0. You have -4 plus or minus square root of 0 over 2. And you get -4 plus or minus 0 over 2. Now, you see how I split it up like this? You really don't need to, but I mean, I just showed that this is going to come out to be one solution. But it's -4 plus 0 over 2 and -4 minus 0 over 2. It's the same answer. So that means there's one solution, -4 divided by 2 and -4 divided by 2. X equals -2, one solution. You really don't have to show one of these sides, but I did just to show you that there is just one solution. Both sides would be equal to X equals -2. So don't stress it, one solution. If you do decide to bring the calculator up, and if you want to check, you have x squared plus 4x plus 4. And I do consider this a check. You could see that there is one solution right there. It's x equals -2. And it's very important that once you get finished with all of this work, that you go ahead and at least check it, using the calculator. Go ahead, do number 3, press pause now. Okay, so we have 8 as A, B as -12, and C as -8. So it's a little tricky when you substitute. You're supposed to turn the B to a different sign. So if it's -12 already, then it becomes +12. But this is how you would show it. And then plus or minus square root B squared, which is -12, squared minus 4 times 8 times -8, which is A and C. So you put all of this into the calculator. Just don't mess around with it. It becomes 400, which is good because it's a perfect square. You have 12 plus or minus 20 over 16. 12 plus 20 over 16 is 32 over 16 is 2. And then 12 minus 20 over 16 is -8 over 16. That's -0.5. So just taking a look, those are your last 3 problems for this. Okay? And hopefully If you need to look at it any further, you can just press pause and kind of, look at the work. All right. So the next page says write the formula that can be used to solve any quadratic equation. You got to put the formula right here. So what we're asking you to do is to actually memorize that formula. So it always starts with an x. X equals. Let's see if I get it. Continues on with a negative b. The plus or minus. The square root. Let's see if I can write that. Oh yes. B squared. Minus 4 times A times C. It's not the end of it. It's pretty bad. And then I'm going to draw my straight line with this because this is a nightmare. Okay? How about that straight line? And then 2A. 2 times A, which is 2A. Right? Let me just fix that up a bit. It's a little bit better. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, so identify the values. Pretty quick. Let's do do 2, 3, and 4 right away, and we'll come back with those answers. You could press pause now. You don't have to solve them. Just put what A, B, and C is down for each one. Remember, they have to be in standard form, and none of these are in standard form right now. So there's a little bit of work to do, but not that much. All right. Transfer everything over to one side and then make it equal to 0. All right. And usually you're going to just go ahead. All right. See you. Bye. Press pause. All right. Hopefully you were able to do this. Let's go over each one though. I added 12 to both sides to make this a standard form quadratic. You have x squared minus 4x plus 12 now because you moved that 12 over. A is 1, B is negative 4, and C is 12. For number 3, I added the x squared and I moved it over to the left side. You have x squared minus 6x plus 4. Now in standard form, written in standard form, A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is 4. This number 4, negative 8x equals 3x squared plus 3. I added 8x over to the right side because now that left side would have 0, and that's what you need. And then just wrote everything in standard form. You have 3x squared plus 8x now, and then plus 3. So the A is 3, the B is 8, and the C is 3. And that's it. So number 5, 6, and 7, just as you see them, they're all written in standard form, nice and easy. It says solve the equation using the quadratic formula. So that means that you have to use that quadratic formula. A lot of work to show here, just like you did the other questions on the other 2 pages that we did. Go ahead, try number 5. Make sure you have that quadratic formula committed to memory and substitute the A, B, and C in. The first thing that you do is to write the A, write the B, and write the C down. All right, so don't forget to do that. All right, so you have A, B, and C, and you're going to label them 1, negative 12, and 36. Okay, and that's about it. Okay, and just go ahead and use that quadratic formula. You can try that problem. You can press pause now. Okay, so take a look. You have A equals 1, b equals negative 12 and c equals 36 like we put down. I substituted a negative b in, and that became positive. You have plus or minus square root, negative, which is b squared. b is negative 12, so you have negative 12 squared minus 4a, which is 1, and c times c, which is 36. This whole thing, put it all in your calculator, you will get 0. So, square root of 0. 2 times 1 is 2. So you have x equals 12 plus or minus 0 equals, divided by 2, and you have 12 plus 0, and you have 12 minus 0, which is the same thing again, and x equals 6, and that is one solution. All right, go ahead, try number 6 on your own. You could press pause now. All right, so we have a equals 2, b equals negative 1, and c equals negative 1 as well. So you have negative b that you have to put in here, but b is already negative, so double negative makes it positive. Then you have negative 1 plus or minus negative 1 squared for b squared, and minus 4 times a, which is 2, and times c, which is negative 1. 2 times a, which is a is 2, that's 4. So that would be 1 plus or minus the square root of 9. You put all of this inside the radical in your calculator, and you will get 9, which is a perfect square, which is good. And you get 3. So it's 1 plus 3 over 4 and 1 minus 3 over 4. Just like I have here, and 4 divided by 4 equals 1, and that's one of the roots, and 1 minus 3 equals negative 2 divided by 4. Negative 2 divided by 4 is negative 0.5. And that's that one. Go ahead, try number 7, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Press pause now. Okay, so we have a equals 1, b equals negative 5, and c equals 3. When you substitute that negative 5 in, remember that first part of that quadratic equation has to be negative b. So when it's negative already, it turns into a positive, but you show it negative and negative. Plus minus square root negative b squared. B squared, which b is already negative. Minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 3. They're all divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. So you have 5 plus or minus square root of 13. If you put all of the numbers inside the radical in your calculator, you do get 13. That's why I was saying round to the nearest tenth. So square root of 13 is 3.6. That's why I rounded to 3.6. So if you put square root of 13 into your calculator, you do get 3.6055, and that's why you get 3.6. You round it to the nearest tenth. Divided by 2, so you have 5 plus 3.6, and then 5 minus 3.6. So you're all dividing by 2. 8.6 divided by 2, 1.4 divided by 2. You get x equals 4.3, or x equals 0.7. Press pause if you need anything on this page, and you just to look at anything on this page, just follow the steps of the quadratic formula and you will be fine. So one of the questions that they always ask is an error analysis question. It says describe and correct the error in solving the equation. So what you have to do, you have x's here, right? So both of these are incorrect as far as I know. So I would just take this as describe and correct the error. I would just take this and just go ahead and solve it using the quadratic formula. So that's what I think you would do for this one and also this one. Remember, this has to be in standard form. This one is already in standard form. So this is like 2 problems rolled into one. Let's just focus on the first one on the left first. go ahead, see if you could solve this fully. Just go all the way through and solve it. And we'll come back and discuss it. Press pause now. Okay, so all right, so you have right here, you have -7, which I put A equals 3, B equals -7, C equals -6. And this person here was supposed to put -7 when they put that in. That's a common mistake. That's why they are doing this right here with this, and this is the error. So they did not take the negative value of B. I did correct it, so it's -7, which is a +7. Then I substituted everything in, and I got 121/6, the square root of 121/6. When you go down, you were supposed to correct that, and you have a square root of a 121 is 11, and you have 7 plus 11 and 7 minus 11. You divide each side by 6, and you get 18 divided by 6. X equals 3, and X equals -0.67, which is -2/3, and I like to put it in decimal form. And that's basically it for that question. The error was right up there. All right, go ahead, try number 2. Do it the same way. Try to see if you could find that error and correct that whole problem. Press pause now. All right, here we go. So this is not in standard form. So the first thing that I did was -4 on both sides and made the equation equal to 0. And that's what I should put right there. Okay. So then looking through this, the mistake is clearly right here. So just take a look. A is -2, B is 9, and C is -4. So when this person substituted in, they substituted in correctly, made this negative, that's the B, plus or minus square root B squared, which is 9 squared, that's okay, -4 times -2, which is the A, times the C, which is -4, but they put 4. So that's their mistake right there. Did not write the equation in standard form probably, and substituted the 4 in as a C. You see right here? And so that's like a common mistake that a lot of people do also. When I finish this though, it's 2 times A, which is -2. When I put all of this inside inside my calculator, I got square root of 49. Square root of 49 is a perfect square. 2 times -2 as your denominator. And you have -9 plus or minus 7 divided by -4. And you end up having -9 plus 7 divided by -4, which is -2 divided by -4. Negative divided by negative is positive. And you have x equals 0.5. You have -9 minus 7, which is -16. -16 divided by -4, again a positive, is 4. I checked the whole thing in my calculator, did get it correct. The roots show up as 0.5 and or x equals 4. And that's the mistake right there. All right, so the discriminant is an expression under the radical in the quadratic formula. That's called the discriminant, and that's sometimes what they ask for on a test. It is used to determine how many solutions a quadratic equation has before you even solve it. So just take a look. If you have the quadratic formula up here, underneath the radicals, b squared minus 4 times a times c, right? That is the discriminant. Not bad. So remember, it has to be in standard form, and you have x squared minus 6x plus 3. So with this discriminant, you could tell how many solutions the quadratic is going to have before you even solve it. And before I go any further, let me explain. So let me just look down here, right? Let's look down here together. So we have if b squared minus 4 times a times c. If that number is greater than 0, you have two solutions. If that number is equal to 0, you have just one solution. And if it's less than 0, in other words, if it's a negative number, remember, you cannot take the square root of a negative. So if that number is less than 0, it's going to turn out to be no solution. Pretty simple. So let's just take a look, and the first thing that you do is always kind of put down what your B is, what your A is, and what your C is. In this case, you will need, to figure out the discriminant, you will need all three. So your B in this equation is -6. So you put a -6 there, and you're only using underneath the radical. Right? That's the discriminant, -6 squared. Minus 4 times A, and A right here is 1. And times C, which is 3. So you put this into your calculator, just like that, and you will get 36 minus 12, you'll get 24. You don't have to take the square root of it. It's 24. It's greater than 0, so that's two solutions. Let's take a look at this one. A is 1, B is -6, C is 9. So you take the B squared minus 4AC, and you start substituting in. The -6 squared is your B squared, right? You put that in, substitute that in for B. Minus the 4 from the formula times A, which is 1 in this case, and then times C, which is 9 in this case. You do all of that in the calculator, and not underneath the square root, but perfectly right on the main page of the calculator, you'll get 0. And as soon as you get 0, that means there's one solution. I wanted to make sure that you understand that you're on the main page of the calculator. You're not putting it in a square root. So you're putting -6 and then squaring it, minus 4 times 1, and then times 9. This is the B squared minus 4 times A times C. You press enter, you get 0. That's what you put, 0, one solution. If it's equal to 0, it's one solution. I just wanted to show you that once. So now here's the third one. You have x squared, which is 1, that's A. This is B. This is C, 12. Now you substitute in. You have B squared minus 4 times A times C. B squared is -6 squared, which is 36. But I don't even care about that. I'm going to put it into the calculator. -6 squared. Minus 4 times A, which is 1. And then times C, which is 12 in this case. You have 36 minus 48. You have -12. Remember, you cannot take the square root. Like if this was in as part of the quadratic formula, if you're trying to figure this out, you would have to do plus or minus -12. Square root of -12. That's impossible. So that's why when it's less than 0, when that comes out to be less than 0, that means there's no solution. So if it's positive, the answer is positive, that means it has two solutions. If the answer is equal to 0, it has one solution. It's just touching the x-axis. And if it's less than 0, it's negative. That means that it is not touching the x-axis. There are no solutions. All right. So that's really how you would do that. And we are going to practice right now figuring out the discriminant and the number of solutions. So we're going to use the discriminant of b squared minus 4ac for every one of these problems. So remember, it's b squared minus 4AC. For all of these problems. And this is for number 1. There's no room to put it under here, but I'm going to just use what we have there. So the discriminant is this. So I am going to substitute the 4 squared in. And it's just like this. So 4 squared, this is the b, and I made a mistake there. So, and I corrected that. So b is my -2. That's why it's important to have that written down, the a, the b, the c, right? So -2 squared, which is my 4. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to put this into the calculator, and it'll give me the answer. So it's -2, close the parentheses, squared, minus, I'm not going to press enter until I'm finished inputting. That's exactly the way I'm showing that substitution there. And just let me double check my A, my B, and my C. My A is 4, so my B is -2, so I have -2 squared. Minus 4 times A, my A is 4, that's correct, and my C is 10. So that's all correct, and now I'm going to press enter, and I have -156. And you know that -156, -156 is no solution, right? If it's negative, that means it is no solution. Go ahead and try to do number 2, just like we did. See how many solutions you get. Press pause now. And number 2, we have A is -2, B as 1, and C as -5. Double checking that. B squared would be 1 squared minus 4 times A, which is -2, and times C, which is -5. I put all of this into the calculator like you see right here, and I get -39. No solution. Less than 0. Go ahead, see if you can do number 3. Just remember, put it in standard form first, and then go ahead and find the discriminant. And you can press pause now. So number 3, the first thing I told you that you would have to do is to subtract 10 on both sides to make this a standard form quadratic, and you get x squared minus x minus 10, and that A is 1, B is -1, and C is -10. If you put C as +10, you are going to get the wrong answer. So B squared is -1 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, and C is -10. And that comes out to be 41 when you put it in the calculator, and you get 2 solutions with that because it's greater than 0. Okay, that was number 1, 2, and 3, and you could go ahead and try number 4 on your own right now. Press pause now. And you'll look at number 4. Number 4, A equals 4. B equals 0, and C equals 25. When you go ahead and use the B squared minus 4AC to find the discriminant, you have 0, which is your B, 0 squared, which is 0, minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is 25. And you get -400. You put that in the calculator. Less than 0, no solution. Please go ahead. Try number 5 now, and of course, press pause now. Taking a look at number 5, we have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0, A equals 1, B equals 4, and C equals 4 as well. Use the B squared minus 4AC. You have 4 squared for b, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and times 4, which is c. Put this into the calculator, you get 0. That is one solution. When it's equal to 0, it's one solution. Go ahead and try number 6 on your own. Press pause now. And the last problem right here, number 6, you have, it's in standard form. This is a, which is 9, and the b is 0, and the c is negative 36. You have b squared minus 4ac. You have b squared as 0 squared, which is 0, minus 4 times a, which is 9, times negative 36, which is c. All of that in the calculator comes out to 1,296, and that is way greater than 0, so that means you have 2 solutions. All right, so the state test prep is on the bottom. Hopefully you got those correct and you understand what's going on with the discriminant. And state test prep, a quadratic will blank have 2 solutions. Always, sometimes, or never. Give you 2 seconds to answer that. Think of your answer. All right, so a quadratic will always have 2 solutions? No, it's not always going to have 2 solutions. We already have one solution, no solution, 2 solutions. Sometimes have, okay, or never have 2 solutions. No, we can have 2 solutions. So sometimes is your answer, and that was an easy one. All right, when solving quadratic equations, choose an appropriate method. Graphing. You have your graphing calculator handy at all times. Square roots. The equation has no x term. You're solving using the square root method. Factoring. You could factor the equation easily. Do it that way. All right? Or use the quadratic formula. Remember, the equation will not be, cannot be factored easily at all. And that's the only method that you know how to basically do. And remember, the quadratic formula always works. It always works. So don't shy away from it because of the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula has to be committed to memory. So try to commit it to memory, and that's it. And then completing the square, it's best when a equals 1 and b is even. Okay, so you're completing the square. So these are all the methods that we've learned in this unit, and it is a very difficult unit, I believe. Here's the exit slip. Go ahead and try number 1. It says use the quadratic formula to solve each equation. So you're welcome to just go ahead and do that. Just remember, you have to get it into standard form, then put a equals, b equals, and c equals down, and then write that quadratic formula down so you could, or have it by you, substitute the numbers in, get the 2 roots, check it in your calculator, and that's it. So you could do number 1, press pause now. All right, so the first thing I did was subtract 12 and add 2m from both sides, and I got 2m squared plus 2m minus 12 equals 0. I did that because it has to get into standard form of a quadratic, and standard form is that x squared plus whatever x and minus or plus whatever the number is, without the variable. So you now have a is 2 and b is 2 and c is negative 12. I'm using this quadratic formula, even though it says in the directions to first use the discriminant. I'm doing it here anyway, so I'm just going to go through what the quadratic formula is. Then I'll basically decide at the point underneath the radical how many solutions this is going to have. So I have negative 2 because that is supposed to be b, but it's supposed to be negative b, plus or minus square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4 times a times c, which is 2 and negative 12. All of this underneath the radical is the discriminant, which is 100. So it's greater than 0. So I know this is going to have two solutions. Right here, I could actually write down two solutions. And just like that, that 100 means two solutions greater than 0. So now you could just keep on going with the quadratic formula. Square root of 100 is definitely 10, you know that. And you have negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 4. Negative 2 plus 10 divided by 4 comes out to 8 divided by 4, and that's as x equals 2. And then the negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12 over 4. Negative 12 over 4 is negative 3. So you do have two solutions. You knew it up here when this was greater than 0. Go ahead, see if you can do number 2. It is in standard form already, so go ahead and see if you could do that. You press pause now. Okay, so here we go. Almost last question. So we have A is 2, B is negative 3, C is negative 5. And you have negative, remember it has to be negative B, so when it's negative already, it becomes a positive. And you show it like that, plus or minus negative 3 squared minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 5. 2 divided by A, which is, 2 times A, which is 2 times 2, which is 4. All of this underneath the square root radical is 49. If you put it into the calculator, that means it's greater than 0, so it is definitely going to be two solutions. So you have 3 plus or minus the square root of 49, which is 7, and I'm moving down here, so this is 3 plus 7 divided by 4, and then 3 minus 7 divided by 4. 10 divided by 4 is 2.5, and x equals negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. So those are your roots. That is basically your work right here, and that's it. We could tell right up here that we had two solutions because underneath the radical was greater than 0. So the last question right here is a Regents question. How many real solutions does the equation x squared minus 2x plus 5 have? And you have to justify your answer. Go ahead, see if you can do that right now. And just a little bit of a hint here, just use the formula right here. B squared minus 4ac. All right, so that's the formula that you could test how many solutions it has. All right, that's just a little bit of a hint. You can press pause now. All right, so last question. How many real solutions does this equation have? A equals 1, B is negative 2, and C is 5. And I'm going to use B squared minus 4 times A times C. And this B squared is negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1, which is your A in this case, and times C, which is your C, which is 5 in this case. So I am just going to substitute that into the calculator because my calculator is my friend. All right, so minus 4 times 1 times 5. If I press enter, I get negative 16. I'm going to write that down. So, does this have a real solution? Remember, when you just solve for that discriminant, it was a negative number, negative 16. And it doesn't matter what, if it was negative 16 or negative 100 or negative 121 or negative whatever. You can't take the square root of a negative number. So there are no real solutions for this because, again, you're getting a negative. And I wrote this down here. There are no real solutions to this because solving for the discriminant gives you a negative number, a number less than 0. Remember, a number less than 0 means that you have no solution, no real solutions. All right, so, and that's basically it. I hope this video helped you out, and with a rather difficult lesson here and a difficult unit. Go ahead, you feel free to use this video and every video in this unit to really just review what you have learned, because there has been a lot, right? So this was not an easy unit at all. And that's it. Good luck and thanks for watching. Take care, everybody.